So I was fiddling around recently in one of the language learning folders on my computer, and I sort of stumbled onto a new technique. Well, it's not a new technique, it's a way of practicing a long existing technique that I have not discovered before. And as I discovered it, I thought, wow, this is much more interesting than this practice normally is for me. And I can use this for like hundreds of hours of material that I already have. And that got me thinking about how we can best use the material that we already have, the resources that we already have, to learn our languages better and in a more interesting way that will keep us at it for longer. But it's a very tricky balancing act, and I think a lot of people fail to realize this, and myself included. I've fallen into this in the past. Instead of using what we already have to move towards the language learning goals that we have, we use what we already have to guide the language learning goals that we have. So say someone were to give you this amazing Chinese learning program and you weren't even learning Chinese, and this thing cost like say $1,500 or something. It would be very tempting for some people to say, well, maybe I should start learning Chinese, which seems kind of efficient in one way, but when you think about it, it's kind of dumb to let the resources that we have guide what we're already doing. But then you can also go fully the other way, which is to look for the perfect resource after you've decided your goal. So let's say you have this goal of becoming fluent in Spanish. You go out looking, what's the best Spanish resource? You watch every YouTube video, everything on exactly what the best thing you should be doing is. This is my story with photography through and through. Like 8 years ago or so, when I was getting really into photography, I spent hundreds of hours looking for exactly the right thing to make my photos better. It's so stupid. If I'd spent all that time just out taking photos, I would be 3 times the photographer today. So it's a very tricky balancing act. You don't want to use what you already have to guide your goals. You want to make sure your goals are what you want them to be, but you also don't want to go looking for exactly the right material. So that got me thinking, the best balance is to use what we already have to serve the goals that we've already set. Now, the reason that we don't use the resources that we already have to achieve the goals that we've already set is mostly that it's not as fun, it's not as immediately rewarding to our internal reward system, right? We love that feeling of abundance, of gathering all the 283 Spanish movies that we have and knowing that if we just watch them through, then our Spanish will improve hugely. We love that feeling of like, this is all I have to do, it's such a clear path. Or we also love that excitement of a new purchase. We don't even probably like actually making the purchase so much. We like looking for it. We like that hunt of like, oh, I wonder if this is the best Chinese resource for me, or is it this? A lot of people ask me about apps, and I feel like it's probably for that reason. They just like that feeling of like, but I wonder if it is the one. The thing about those is they're short-lived. Those feelings of like, you know, the new purchase or the clear path where you just have to watch your 400 Spanish movies, they're short-lived. Once you actually start doing it, you realize that it's all the same hard work that you had to do before, and you get bored of it. So what is the middle ground? How do we find this balance? And what is this new kind of method, this way of going about it that I've discovered for myself? Well, I've always thought it would be, and it is, helpful to watch back through my recorded Skype lessons, right? Because I record lessons that I book with teachers on iTalki, and then I've got a video of that I can watch back through, or at the very least listen back through and write down things, that new words that come up and everything like that, because you're not going to remember them from just the one lesson. So I've always felt like that is helpful when I do it, but it would be helpful to do it heaps more often, like every day basically. But I don't. And why don't I? Because it's boring, okay? It's not actually that bad once you start doing it, but it always feels boring. It feels like it won't really do anything, and you'd much rather go and look for the new textbook or whatever. Like I said, you bounce between the two extremes. You're not satisfied with what you already have. However, I was playing around with shadowing, okay? I've gotten into the idea recently. I know it's not a new idea. It's not a new idea to me either. I've never really been bothered doing it. So for the people who say that my Swedish accent is okay. Well, thank you, but I've never really worked on it, okay? That's just how it is. So it could be a lot better, like a lot better, if I did some shadowing, if I really worked on how I sounded. Again, boring. I don't like doing it. But I was watching back through a recent lesson of mine, and it was good. And I realized that in the lessons, I spend the majority of the time talking. Like 2/3 of the time is actually what I've worked out, a little bit more. Now that might sound really sort of narcissistic or whatever. It's actually just because I take twice as long to say anything as the teacher takes. So it kind of works out. We get the same amount said, but the teacher takes a lot less time because it's their native language. So I realized that, and I was like, watching myself doesn't really help anything. So I spend most of the time watching the teacher, and I spend a lot of time hitting the space bar, that is stopping it, and saying what the teacher just said. And then I thought, this would probably be quicker if I were to get this into a video editing program and take out all the bits where I'm talking and just narrow it down to the bits where the teacher is talking, and then watch that back through and shadow that. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's new. Like I said, novelty, it excites us. But this is way more interesting to me than the idea of watching through a whole Skype lesson, because I've realized in a 1-hour lesson, the teacher is generally only talking for 18 to 20 minutes, and that seems so much more digestible. And then I realized that my level in the language doesn't really matter, because teachers tend to talk about the same way, unless you're like a really, really beginner, right, the whole time. So it doesn't matter if I go back way back to my early lessons when I was like, "Jag kan." The teacher still talks at the same speed. So I can go back through those and get that goodness out of those lessons and scrub them down to just the 18 minutes or whatever that the teacher was talking, probably even less back then. And then I'll have this amazing, sort of database of all these different teachers talking that I can then use to shadow. Now, I'm not going to do this for every single lesson, because some teachers I would deliberately not want to shadow. I don't want that accent. It's not a thing about their accent. It's just that their accent doesn't belong in the category of accent that I want. So there are various reasons that I wouldn't use every single lesson. But just having this way that I've distilled all this good stuff down to just the parts that are the best and are the most beneficial, that's exciting to me, and I'm excited to do it more. Now, will it get boring eventually when the novelty wears off? For sure. But this is something I want you to think about. Can you distill what you have down to its most important and interesting elements so that you can use the resources that you have better? Here's the thing. When you're looking for something to do in your target language, unless you're a complete beginner, you're probably not trying to find out what's good to do and what's not. The truth is, you probably know what to do. And I don't say that to judge anyone. I'm exactly the same with diet and exercise, right? I know what food is good for me and that I should be exercising, right? I know that, but I don't do it because I like Oreos more. But when it comes to target language stuff, I'm always looking for what will actually interest me but is at the same time beneficial. These are what I call gold mines, right? When you find something that you're like, this is not only engaging but actually beneficial. Some stuff is more engaging and less beneficial, other stuff is more beneficial and less engaging. It doesn't matter if the balance isn't perfect, as long as you can sustain doing it, as long as you can actually tolerate it and it's beneficial, those are gold mines. So with me, I've found that I've got all these Skype lessons that I can distill down to just when the teacher's talking and shadow them, and I think it's going to be really beneficial. The novelty will wear off for sure, but that's okay, and then I'll find other stuff I can do. So wrapping this up, if you've hit a bit of a wall, or you've even hit a bit of a motivation wall in your language learning, think about what's out there, what can you get your hands on, whether it's stuff on YouTube, stuff already on your computer, or in your apartment or house or whatever. What can you use better than you have already been using it, or what can you make more interesting to yourself by really distilling it down to what's going to be interesting to you or beneficial to you, and hopefully both, so that it's something you can actually do to take your language to the next level. Don't just keep doing the same thing just because it's engaging to you if it's not actually beneficial, and don't not do anything, because that's obviously bad as well. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think you might be doing and what language and everything, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. See ya.